Hey y'all, Rick Sky here. Welcome back to another Timepieces for Tomorrow video. And within this video, I want to talk about how social media changed the watch collecting hobby. So that, to state the obvious, I've been collecting watches well before social media and even traditional internet, like a website, before that existed. So this video I'm going to focus upon how social media in particular changed the wristwatch collecting hobby. So starting out, obviously I've always been an entrepreneur. I've owned multiple businesses, and part of that was, I'm putting together all these business plans, I'm executing, and I want something to acknowledge my success. So that was kind of my initial stance when it came to watch collecting. So my first wristwatch was the Omega Seamaster 300M Blue Wave dial, which is an exceptional timepiece, and that was prior to, even mainstream websites when I got that, and way before social media. But what social media has done for wristwatch collectors, it's kind of fascinating, it's kind of troubling concurrently. But when I had that initial wristwatch, the Omega Seamaster 300M, I'm like, there's so many different watches out there, but there's not a lot of information. Somebody could go to a store, to an authorized dealer where they sell wristwatches, and they could be sold a watch, but the act of being sold a wristwatch is not in my opinion, an authentic purchase decision. It wasn't backed by extensive self-research, and back then there weren't a lot of ways to research wristwatches, or were there? So let's track back to the earlier days of social media, and let's look at a personality, Archie Luxury, Archibald Chesterfield III. Arguably, and correct me if I'm incorrect when I make this statement, but arguably he was the first wristwatch personality on YouTube. Now, if there were others, comment below, tell me who they were, because I'm curious. But he was the one that I found when all I had was the Omega Seamaster 300M, and I wanted to check out other wristwatches. Archie Luxury is a wealth of knowledge, and not only a wealth of knowledge, but he is an example of how, and I'm about to get into the weeds here, but how social media has changed the wristwatch collecting hobby. So in the case of Archie Luxury, wristwatches at the time, that was fascinating. You were able to get on, you were able to see a variety of different brands, different models. In the wristwatch world, they call them references, and it was showcased in a comedic way. And it was pretty interesting, the early days of Archie Luxury, the way that he would share these timepieces that people potentially have never seen before, but he would get access to them, he would showcase them, he would tell you the brutally honest truth, what is good is what and what is not. And to this day, the lessons learned from Archie Luxury has never been a bad purchase decision. Now that's going to segue us into the next thing. So social media has changed watch collecting, because now, and especially when we fast forward from, like I said, Archie Luxury I think came out around 2008, but when you fast forward to 2020, that's when things really get interesting. But we're going to put on the brakes a little bit, and we're going to step back. So the early days, watches weren't that big of a deal. Archie Luxury would tell you what's good, what's not, but at least it was a great guide, so that if you were in the process of acquiring an additional wristwatch, you felt reasonably confident going into the authorized dealer that you were making a proper purchase decision and not something that was being sold by the salesperson. So for that reason, in the early days, I knew what I was looking for. Now in these days, in the early days of wristwatch collecting, one could walk into most any authorized dealer for most any brand, and every authorized dealer would have every single wristwatch reference there available to purchase. We're going to get into that here in a moment within this video, but it was easy to do the research up front, watching YouTubers like Archie Luxury, then do self-research and decide, what do I want to add? And at the time, what was interesting, one could go into most any brand's authorized dealer and haggle for a substantial discount. And a lot of people wouldn't, because it made them, they thought, I'm being cheap if I do this. No, it's smart business, because going in there knowing what could potentially be achieved discounts, and some of those discounts were hefty, and I always got extremely deep discounts because I was a stiff negotiator. But I was getting steep discounts on high quality timepieces, so I wasn't going in there and haggling for junk. Anybody can do that. Anybody can walk into an authorized dealer and purchase an undesirable timepiece and walk out with it for a discount. And in reality, they're not getting a discount because they're walking out with something that's undesirable. But social media, especially once we got into 2020, and I won't go into there, you know, everybody knows what happens around 2020, but people were stuck at home, and people that weren't interested in collecting watches historically, they then became interested in that among other hobbies. So you saw this flood of people forced to be at home, and they had this new way to entertain themselves. They could go into the wristwatch collecting hobby. Now, that is where social media really changed the wristwatch world. But let's talk about a few other things first. So leading up to that, social media changed the wristwatch world because it took, and I'll give one example, the Rolex Hulk, the green bezel Submariner. When that thing first came out, it was undesirable. But because of social media marketing, that became one of the hottest and most collectible Rolex wristwatches. I mean, people didn't want it. Back in the early days, it would sit in authorized dealers. People didn't want it. But because of social media's influence, it became a highly desirable collectible piece. So that's just one of many examples. Then you get into other brands, you know, step outside of Rolex. You're seeing what's called the Holy Trinity: Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, Vacheron and Constantin. You're seeing those gain popularity. And today, those brands, the Holy Trinity, which is just a phrase for the top three watch brands, perception-wise, but they're good brands, and they've been making wristwatches a long time. But for example, looking at brands like Vacheron and Constantin, one could purchase, before all the social media hype, a Vacheron and Constantin overseas for next to nothing, and even haggle and get a discount. But now those are highly sought after and through the roof price pieces, heavily linked to social media's influence on the wristwatch world. So what social media has done, it has taken some perceived dogs of these different brands, just the pieces, the references that people didn't want, and it's changed them to some of the most desirable pieces. Again, back to the Rolex Hulk example. That's a great example of that. But what it's also done, it has, on the secondary market, because initially with wristwatches, people weren't really even pondering, most people weren't pondering the possible price appreciation when they made their purchase. But what social media has done for the watch collecting hobby, it is heavily, whether one likes it or not, it has heavily tied the possibility of appreciation to the purchase decision of each wristwatch, meaning that people in their minds now, because of social media, they're probably limiting themselves in their mind to certain brands and certain references from those brands, whereas pre-social media, people would go after what they liked and felt good on their wrist. So now there's a social media component that is steering people to go a certain way because they feel like if they go with what they like, that they're making a poor purchase decision. Now, if someone is looking for the possibility, again, wristwatches are not investments, but if somebody's looking for the possibility of price appreciation, taking those things into consideration is important in the event that they wanted to sell or trade one of their watches in the future. But if someone was just buying a watch because they liked it, it was their favorite one in the counter at the authorized dealer, that possibility of price appreciation is a moot point. But so you can see here, as I've illustrated, and comment below, tell me what you think, ask questions, and I'll post some follow-up videos. But I have lived through the pre-internet days, pre-mainstream internet days when I got the Omega Seamaster 300M. Then I found the true social media knowledge, Archie Luxury online, and expanded the level of personal wristwatch knowledge. And then 2020 hit. 2020, very fascinating. People stuck at home, they're bored, they're trying to find new hobbies, things to collect, and wristwatches ticked all the boxes. 2020, and I'm not going to name drop because you know who they are, all of these wristwatch experts emerged overnight. They started with a few hundred views, then they got a few hundred followers, then some of them have amplified to 300,000-400,000 plus subscribers just on YouTube, for example. Those people saw the business opportunity. Good for them. You know, entrepreneurship's a good thing. But the internet became flooded, social media I should say, became flooded with wristwatch experts starting in 2020. And what that did, that amplified the perceived shortage of certain wristwatches. Well, because of 2020, for example, the staff that a lot of these wristwatch manufacturers had on site was limited, if none. So there was a shortage because of the political thing that was going on. But then there was an amplified shortage because you've got so many people looking for a new hobby, and you've got these social media watch experts shoving certain watches down people's throats, and they were in short supply. So you were seeing shortages of desire, well, what social media amplified and made the most desirable wristwatch references from the most desirable wristwatch brands. They were in extreme short supply. Some of them during 2020 and the years following that were trading hundreds of % over the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price, meaning that a wristwatch in an authorized dealer, let's just throw some hypothetical numbers, maybe it was $3,500, but on the secondary market it was selling, you know, potentially trading for $15,000. I mean, ridiculous dollar amounts. But what social media has also done in 2020, the kind of the perfect storm there, it has forced all of these, because a lot of the big manufacturers, I'll use Omega and Rolex for example, not limited to them, but typically, if not across the board, typically at least a few references annually, they insert a price increase. So you've got the annual price increases, they put that, and then on top of the hype, because they know that, you know, looking at 2020, that people could only find certain wristwatches on the secondary market, so they really ratcheted up their prices. So now the point of entry, heavily linked to social media, is insane for certain wristwatch brands and certain wristwatch references, meaning that it has caused people, and we're going to talk about this within separate videos, but it has caused a lot of the new collectors, you know, people that weren't fortunate enough to get involved with wristwatch collecting before social media hit and really just got the prices to run out of control. But it has basically eliminated certain brands and certain references from somebody that's just starting a wristwatch collection today. So that's how we got to where we are today with wristwatch collecting. And although it's unfortunate, there have been some value adds from social media. Obviously the huge perceived negative is, well, it's made a lot of wristwatches unaffordable. But the positive is it's put a lot of wristwatches into the spotlight, and we're seeing a lot of innovation. And we're also seeing a lot of, let's call them lower tier wristwatch manufacturer brands. They're putting out some very good stuff at palatable price points. So social media has not necessarily destroyed the wristwatch collecting hobby, but it has opened the doors for new manufacturers to kind of, you know, rise to fame, you know, to put out some good stuff at affordable price points and not insert that inflated hype, what I like to call the hype premium. You know, you've got a brand that's prestigious, people see it, they're like, man, that's the best watch in the world. And I mean, now, I mean, even brands like Tudor, which is Rolex's sister brand, even brands like Tudor, they're priced through the stratosphere. It was a bird. Did y'all hear that? It was a pigeon. But yeah, even brands like Tudor are priced through the stratosphere. So it's really, social media has shaken up the wristwatch collector space. Again, not that it's all negative. Like I said, there's some positives there, and there's innovation from brands that's being prompted by it as well. You know, they want to create something new and different because they know if they do that, well, because of social media is going to be all over it. So they've got their built-in advertising team of the social media, some of which are true watch enthusiasts, like Archie Luxury. I consider myself to be. I mean, I don't feel that I've been polluted by the masses. I mean, that's why I do Timepieces for Tomorrow videos like this one. Yes, I've been doing social media for a long time too, But I just want to share my feedback, not just from the past few years, past few months, but my feedback all the way back to prior to even the existence of social media. So it has changed. Social media has changed the wristwatch collecting space, but don't let it deter you from becoming interested in the hobby. Subscribe to my channel, ring that bell, and check out all of my wristwatch collecting videos. Questions, comments, comment down below, and I'll try to post video responses. Y'all have a good day. Hey y'all, Irix Guy here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please be sure to subscribe to my channel, and when you do, ring that bell icon to be notified whenever I post another video. Thanks for your viewership, and y'all have a good day.